So a few weeks ago at my team building with my edtech team, we did a exercise called 6 Lives. We also do this in our passion and purpose workshop for kids. Have you heard of it before?
Mm-mm. What is it?
Okay, so you kind of get a description of 6 different lives in about 3 sentences. So there's someone who is a teacher but has an estranged daughter, but then sent a lot of kids to MIT. And then there's someone who's a stonemason who doesn't make a lot of money and just spends time building homes, but has a very great family. There's an investment banker who has a disabled daughter and is very loyal to her company, is a senior executive there. There's a wealthy investor who has investments everywhere, travels the world, parties, but is divorced and doesn't have kids. There's someone that's the nonprofit executive who had a pretty successful career in something financial or tech or whatever, but then had this awakening and now wants to move to Africa and to make an impact and I don't know, build water systems there. Am I getting everyone? Was that 6? I don't know, but you get the point. There's 6 different descriptions to do with their family, their work, what they do, and then your job is to, or the exercise is to rank these 6 lives based on who you think is most successful in the order of success. And the goal of this is to better understand your values. And so my team all did this. We all had different rankings, and we talked about why we rank things the way that they are. And so some people on my team are oh, I ranked nonprofit executive first because of the impact, the group impact that you make, and then the teacher next. A lot of people rank stonemason first because they value relationships more than anything. So they ranked it in order of success of relationships. And then some other people might have ranked it for money. And for me, I did rank wealthy investor first, which is, I think, the richest person there, but I didn't rank him based on his wealth, or I didn't rank based on wealth at all. I ranked based on adventure and excitement of that person's life, whether they lived a life worth living. And I was really surprised because no one else on my team ranked theirs in that way. And I didn't even realize I ranked it in that way either. I only through talking about it did I realize, oh, hey, it's not money, because everyone thought that I ranked it based on wealth and money, but it wasn't that. I actually ranked the investment banker last because I actually feel like she was tied to one company for the last 20 years. She has a disabled daughter where she ran a marathon pushing her, which is awesome. That was high in the people who ranked based on relationship. But for me, all of that felt kind of trapped. And the second to last was stonemason, because he just built homes and stayed in his community and had a great relationship and a great life and didn't have a lot of money, but it's not about the money, So why I bring this up is I asked myself this question, and maybe this is something that I just want to talk through, is why do I value adventure so much? And I know you do too, because that's the whole concept of Asian Wonder Woman. This unconventional life, living a fulfilled, but you can get fulfilled in many different ways. But for us, fulfillment is adventure. And I always thought everyone thought of it like that. But clearly even my team, who a lot of them could be digital nomads but aren't, decide that that isn't important to them. And, knowing that, why do you think you crave adventure in your life based on, your upbringing, what you think success is, etc.?
This is a really tough question to unpack, and there's so much to it. And I do want to preface that, again, everyone's lives are important, regardless of what decision you make. I think, just to speak to my own experiences, I really think it's because of my father. So for context, my father is someone who sold his house in Taiwan, and he did his MBA in Texas and then moved the family to California. He really was the pioneer of his family, and he did whatever it took to get us there. And I think that was super impactful. And he doesn't talk about a lot of the racism and how he ate chicken wings for he ate chicken wings for 5 months straight because they were scrimping on money. I actually, when I was born, my crate was a shopping cart from 99 cents. There was so many struggles that my family went through that I don't really share or talk about. But I think unpacking this and slowly having these conversations with my father showed me wow, my father actually was super adventurous and pushed us even like since the beginning. And he would do like little things to make me and my sister super hyper independent, which is like go order food in English at McDonald's. He would like enroll us in like tennis classes. He would enroll us in like swim classes. Like he made us learn very practical skills and started like kind of almost like training us. I don't know.
Why is tennis practical?
Because for him, he was like, you are part of a team. You learn like hand-eye coordination. You're healthy, you're fit. You know, it's like certain things like that. So like my dad didn't have the mentality of like, my kid needs to be like straight A student. It was more of like, I want my kid to be like street smart. I want her to be gritty. I want her to have all these like capable skills. Like just, he really focused on more like high EQ actually. And I think that was like his perspective on life. Like if you have high EQ, you can make it out in this world. Though IQ also is just as important. It's just perception. But I think I alluded a lot to my father. I have a lot of characteristics that take after him. But to be honest, I think it's also just his support and like whatever. Like I was like, I want to go to San Francisco. He's like, go. I was like, I want to go to China, Beijing for a year. And he's like, go. Like he actually just did not care and just supported me in whatever I did. So I grew up not in that like, you know, that straight A student household mentality, but it also came with difficulties because I'm still kind of lost. And sometimes it would have been nice to just have some sort of guidance. How was that with your family? Yeah.
So before I go into my family, you said a few things that really resonated with me, and I actually have something to respond, where you say that like you feel kind of lost and that you wanted guidance, and your dad was really supportive in like whatever it is that you do. And you've talked about your dad a few times on this podcast too. And I get a feeling that he's someone who believes that life is just, you just go do the things that you want to go do. Right. And that's why he's super supportive. And being lost is just a part of life because he went and carved his own path, moving from Taiwan to Texas and then to San Francisco and then now back to Taiwan. And, you know, probably made choices that, including how to educate you and your sister based on what he thinks life is about. And to him, it's like, go and have these like experiences. It doesn't like, there's no one clear path to success. Right.
Yeah. It's been very normalized in our family. Like the taking risks has been very normalized in our family. But
for
obviously
what? For what? Like, what does he think success is then?
That's the thing with my family. Like, they don't really care what I do. I mean, maybe my mom does. Like, I think my mom's like, please find a husband. Like, please get a stable job. Please work in government. Like, you know, that's like her mentality of like just. But
she doesn't push it.
She doesn't push it. Yeah. But my family, like, I mean, honestly, like when I was in Bay Area, like working at a startup or like, I think their success, the idea of their success is just like is government job. Like they're like anything that's stable, pays a good income, has a good severance package or not good severance package, good like social security package. Like that is success where it's like everything is just consistent.
But that's anti how they raised you though. Like if they really wanted you to do that, then why did they say yes to all of the things that you wanted to do?
I think one, because they realize like they just can't control me, like what I'm doing. And also my sister has fulfilled that part already. Like she works government job. She has a government job. She's stable, has a kid, family, career, whatever. Like they're happy with that. I think with me, they're more of like, it would be nice if you work for a government job, but since you're doing all the things that you're doing, we're just going to support you and like root for you while you're doing all of this.
But was that your parents' dream? Like, did your parents want to work a government job? What did they do?
So my mom used to do like, she used to work at like an after school academy. Right. Like she was like a teacher, also like taking care of like the kids there. Like think of like Elite, you know, like Elite, like SAT prep center, like stuff like that. So something similar to that. And then my dad did like a various bunch of like different jobs ranging from like somewhat like of a chief of staff role at like Sharp. Remember Sharp, like along that old company? It's like a manufacturing electronics company. See, like I hope people know this on this podcast. But worked for Sharp, did like real estate, worked for like government, something to do with like you know like airport stuff. I actually don't really know, but all I know is like it has to do with like airport.
A lot of different jobs. Is it? Yes. Did he choose to change these jobs or like? it was
Mm,
out of
I think
necessity?
peak 2008, that's when like the financial crisis happened, and he was a realtor back then. He just like was out of a job and like couldn't sell homes, so he like transitioned into like government, which is why I think he thinks that it's so stable and a good place to be. And given that my sister's in it as well, and she's been in government for like since graduation, like I think that's kind of just been their mentality of like stability is not a bad thing. um yeah, I think it's just more around like control. Like
Mm.
they have given me the optionality to live my life, but in the end they still think that like having stability or a sense of control is like what's most important, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I can understand that because like your dad worked a
Yeah,
bunch of like odd sort of jobs, not really odd jobs, like they were
yeah,
at larger establishments, right? But so he might have seen like what skills were really necessary to succeed and trained you and your
yeah,
sister in that way. But then your family still craved stability. And it's
yeah,
kind of this like, I think it's a mix between East and West thinking
yeah.
because my parents are divorced. My dad lives in China, and my
Mm.
mom has spent the last 25 years in Canada. And Owen and I talk about this all the time, where like his parents, who spent also the last 25 years or so in the US, are way more westernized Asians compared to my dad, who spent the last 20 years in China. Right. And so just the way that they speak to me and what they think is slightly different, even though they're all kind of supportive of the unconventional life that I want to live. And I'm trying to think like what made me crave adventure. You know, I remember being very young, like in middle school and high school, we had like a massage chair in the house, and next to the massage chair was a world map. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know if we recorded when I was in Ottawa, I forgot, but there was a world map behind me. It was that map.
Yeah,
And I would like
yeah,
look at it and be like, oh my gosh, all the places that I'll go.
yeah.
Um, I think that's when it started. Oh yeah, so my dad, he worked in like sales at like a very large like electronics company. Both my parents were telecommunications engineers. When they moved, they worked at Nortel, which also like just famously went bankrupt in the .com bust. And then my mom actually kept her job. My mom never had to switch a job through the entire time, but she always told me like, hey, you know, you're different. Like we're the first generation immigrants. We have to you like crave stability. Like I'm not gonna go and quit and like find a job. She's interviewed in different places, including the government, but she's never really taken the step out to find a new job. But she loves her job. Like she actually really, really enjoys it. Um, but speaking of my dad, who was in sales when I was young, he like traveled a lot and he would send me postcards from different places. And after each one, he'd be like, okay, daddy will take you here someday. But because I only saw him once a year and I usually see him in China, there's not that many opportunities to take me to Germany and Japan and like France, places that he sent these postcards from. But I just knew of these different places and I knew that it was something exciting because my dad positioned it that way. And so I think maybe that had a part in me wanting to travel, but
Hmm.
it really changed in my study abroad. And I know you went to
Yeah.
study abroad too in China. And I
Yeah.
went to study abroad in Warsaw, Poland. And
Mhm.
everyone goes from my university. Like 80% of people who study business from Queen's University in Canada go on exchange. And everyone's lives change. And for me, my one intention when I moved there was I'm going to be my fullest self because
Mhm.
I'm only here for 4 months. I'm going to hang out with the people
Mhm.
that I really enjoy hanging out with. I'm not going to pretend to be something different. And I think that's something I really struggled with in high school and university when I didn't really know who I was and who I
Mm.
really wanted to hang out with. And so without that kind of pressure, I just loved living in Warsaw, Poland. And I loved traveling across Europe because flights and trains were like so cheap to just backpack. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, and I was always a huge fan of history. So in every place, being a cultural traveler was just really, really meaningful to me. So that really lit my spark. And once I found out that, hey, like you can do this all the time, I wasn't the
Mhm.
first digital nomad, right? Like I had examples. Some of my friends in e-commerce started doing it in 2017, right before I left.
Mhm.
And they showed me that, hey, you can go live in different places and continue this life of travel. Like, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah, I think just giving your time in like Poland too. I mean, like using an analogy, I kind of feel like travel sometimes is like building a callus to the world. Like your risk
Sorry, what's a
tolerance gets
callus?
higher. Callus is like,
Oh, a callus, like
like
on your hand
yeah, like a
from
callus.
too much
Yeah,
monkey barring.
like
Okay.
yeah,
Or
monkey barring,
climbing.
tennis, like things like that.
Okay,
It's almost
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
because you're like, I think when you leave your bubble, you're just like faced with like 1,000 different types of decisions to make. When you're overseas, it's like I need to get a SIM card, I need to speak in a different language, I need to make new friends. Like you're building up so many different new things that you're like your brain is like rewired to be more like independent, more confident, especially the confidence part. I think you
Hmm.
get rewired when you like step out of your world. And I think it's kind of like a momentum. Like once you start building that up, like the world is your oyster and you can just do whatever the F you want. So I
Yeah.
think like just thinking about like my time in China as well and your time in Poland, like that was really like the pivotal moment, I think, when maybe both of this started for us.
Yeah. Like, do
Uh,
you like who you are when you're away from all the people that hold you to who you are at home? Right. I think that was the biggest point. I'm like, who am I without my
mhm.
environment that I had curated? I didn't really have a chance in curating, I guess, when I was
Mm.
university or in high school. I kind of went to the high school that was, the place to go. And then I went to university and I chose a degree, and there was a certain subset of people that were there. But then when you travel, you can become whoever you want to be. And that's why at the beginning, I learned so much about myself from traveling, because you're put in situations that test who you are, and you meet people and you have like a fresh start all the time, and that's super exciting. And back then I think social media wasn't that big of a thing, so like you didn't really have
Yeah.
like this persona. Now we both have like this persona online. I think when someone searches us up, they're like, oh, this is you know.
It's interesting because I think in every different country or like every like let's say like relationships too, like I almost revert back into the person that I was when I
Yeah.
met that person, right? It's like my high school best friend, like I just revert back into like I don't know, we just it's just so easy and like comfortable, and we just talk about like dumb things, and I don't need to talk about like what I'm working on or my career. It's just very comfortable. And same with my parents too. When I go back home, I just like I become a kid again, and like my mom's cutting me through, and we don't talk about work things really. It's just more around like family things.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how like my character or my persona changes when I'm like with certain people. But I think what's most comforting is like feeling or being around people who make me feel at home, where like I can take off those layers and just talk about things that like actually matter. Do you feel that way sometimes? Or like, oh, actually, one of the questions I had, do you think it's harder to find those people that make you feel like home wherever you are?
That's a really great question. So this
Yeah.
weekend, I'm actually going to this event in SF called
Hmm.
Philosophy Sleepovers. And the topic, it's the
Oh,
21st one. It happens every month, and
wow.
people go sleep over somewhere where like sometimes it's not a sleepover and you just go till 2 a.m. Like the one that I'm going to. And I'm like, oh geez, I
Yeah.
have not stayed up till 2 a.m. for like a very long time. But I don't know if I'm gonna be awake to discuss philosophical things. But the topic is home. It's like what
Mm,
makes you feel like home, or what makes a place start to feel like home. Um
mm,
and I really crave like a real home. I actually went house hunting in San Francisco
yeah.
near Glen Park
My
um
God.
yesterday. um not It's not a good time to buy yet, according to my
Okay.
parents and Owen's parents. They're
Yeah.
like, do not buy, like hold on to your cash. But
Yeah.
I just like I know what kind of spaces I like now
Mm,
after traveling. And so I want to
mhm.
create that space for myself. And I also know that life is about like curation, right? And then when you have your own
Yeah.
space, you get to curate what you want this space to be like, including art and objects, etc. But right
Mhm.
now, I can only curate the clothes that can fit in one suitcase. And that's about it. And I'm like, I want to start thinking about digital curation too. But to answer your question of
Yeah.
like home,
Mhm.
obviously, like I feel like home whenever I'm with people, like my family, like my parents and Owen. And with friends, I would actually say the opposite of you, where you're like, oh, when you're with your high school best friend, you
Mhm.
revert to your high school self. I hate that. I don't
Mm.
like hanging out with a lot of people from university because I don't want to revert there, or
Yeah.
it feels so long ago that I'm like, I don't even remember who I was. Do you remember who I was? Like, like how should I act and stuff? And so
Yeah.
I almost want to move to Lisbon and like I want to go places and start curating a new community. And there's like two different ways of doing this, and I want to hear your opinion too, because
Yeah.
you can go back to your old community in San Francisco. And that's what Owen wants to do right now. We're like, let's get a place. And I'm starting to fall in love with San Francisco again because of the communities that excite me here, like the philosophy sleepover thing, minus the fact that can't we do like a philosophy brunch? Like, can I get up in the morning?
Why does it be a sleepover?
Yeah. And the people are in their late 20s and 30s too. It's not like a kid, thing where they like to stay up. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. So, I do really like it, but I do almost think like being here, I revert back to who I was, like who I hang out with, what I'm known for, like what I used to do and people that I used to hang out with when I really just want to shed some layers. And I'm not saying that all of my friends can't come along with me. In fact, I think that like friendship is about vulnerability and shared experiences, like sharing your ideas, sharing your stories, sharing your opinions, whatever. There's ways to rebuild that friendship. But then I moved to SF and rebuilt this place, right? So moving to Lisbon, I get to start over, and you get to choose from like literally ground zero how to build a home versus how to toss some stuff out and like put some stuff in, and
Yeah. So you rebuilding a new home and like community in Portugal, like though it's like curation that you want, do you feel like you'll be able to find all the things that you need though? Because Portugal,
know.
I mean, it's tough. Like I mean, Portugal. Okay, like just on the top of my head, I'm like, oh, Portugal. Like I've never been, so I don't have context.
Visit me.
Yeah, I definitely will. Actually, I will come hang out with you. Maybe I'll go there for a month as well. But it's also, it's a hard problem because it's like, will you find the people in Portugal that will make it feel like home? Like that's the whole like thing. And like relationships or like friendships in general, it doesn't take like a day or like a week, right? This is like years of like curation, years of like coffee chats or like years of building projects together, things like that. Like it might be hard going into like a new country and having that expectation of like, oh, I'm building up. Yeah, if that makes sense.
I think it can be really easy too. Like coming to SF, it was easy to make friends because everyone was like that, right? I think there's a big movement into Portugal right now, so I think a lot of people will be looking for friends. Yeah, I don't think it needs to be that. I do think it takes time to build trust, but I don't think it needs to be hard to light up in conversation if you find the right people. But we veered pretty far off from like why do you seek adventure? Like, how has your upbringing affected like your wandering life? Is there anything that like has come up for you in this conversation that we didn't touch on?
I think the only thing that I do want to just share actually is around like the expectations of like Asian parents, which is funny because I feel like Asian parents have such high expectations of their kids sometimes, right? But I feel like for me, I was at the opposite spectrum where I'm like, my parents didn't really have expectations for me. Like I was kind of like the black
Where did
sheep,
the
like,
expectations for yourself come from? Because I always think that like when someone expects highly of you, you start expecting highly of yourself.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in anything specific. But it's like, did your parents never say, oh, you're going to do great things, you're going to lead such an awesome life?
I think I've been undermined a lot, like when I was younger, like especially from my dad. Sometimes like he would be like, oh yeah, like, like that's my youngest daughter. Like she's like, she's, what he would say something that like would piss me off. And he would say it jokingly, like, oh, like, she's like small and cute, but she's like, doesn't have that many brains. It's like stuff like that he would say.
Oh my God.
Like a lot of his friends.
Yo, that's like trauma right there. Are you sure you worked through this?
I don't know. That's the thing. Because like a lot of his friends would be like, oh, your daughter's so pretty. Like, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, like she's so cute and she's so like nice and blah, blah, blah. And he would be like, almost in this weird like way of being humble. It was like, oh no, like, she's just like whatever. So he would say stuff like that. And I think I grew up with that mentality. And then.
Wait, do you think he believed that? Like, do you think he meant it?
I don't think so, actually. Maybe. I don't know.
So it sounds like within you, there's still something that you're like, oh, does my dad
I think I have a
think
chip
that
on my shoulder because of that.
mm,
And also there was like one time in high school where I was like class president. So like I ran against basically no one, right? Like no one wanted to run against me. I won with my then best friend, and we're like president, VP. And I remember one girl asked my friend, like, why is Emily president? She didn't do anything to win. Like, it was just like stuff like that that has been coming up in my life that I feel like I'm always like undermined or like being questioned. And so I think this is more of like an internal thing of like, I need to prove myself to the world.
yeah,
But it's
something to
kind of
prove.
toxic. Yeah, it is kind of toxic because I'm like, there's no pressure except for it's coming from myself. And so sometimes there's an end to it where I need to resolve it. But I think I've been regulating it a lot better these days. But it's funny, right? It's like,
You've
yeah.
chosen your own track to compete in,
Yes.
right? Like very few people are in, which is great that you found it. But at any
Yeah.
point did you think that like climbing that corporate ladder, right? Like showing
There's an
like
end to it.
in the more conventional ways of success, did you ever
Yeah.
try to go for that because of what you just shared?
I think my own success is like determined by me. And so I was like, I actually don't feel that people who climb like corporate ladders are successful because you just have more decisions to make. I don't know, it's all subjective.
But where
right?
did you
So,
get
like,
that from? You know, like where did you get that from? It seems like growing up, what I'm hearing is like you have like these
I think
messages that are very anti, right? And then
because when I was climbing up, right, like at that startup, I was like the community, like I started off as a specialist, community manager, senior community manager, and then there was opportunity to be like head of community, and I was like, I don't want this. So I was like really burnt out, and I was just like, this isn't what I want to do, and I want to be more of like an IC, to be honest, like an individual contributor. And so that's why I was like, I just want to pave my own path and work on my own things. So I guess my path itself is kind of like a battle within me. I'm like, what do I determine as success, and like when will this end? That pressure comes internally. This is why I'm going to therapy.
Yeah, I think you but like, where did this unconventional way of success, where did you learn that was possible?
Did you just in Singapore?
Did you see it? Oh, in Singapore.
I think so. I think it started off in Singapore in the sense where like in 2020, like like me moving to Singapore, like trying to find a job. And then I guess like I met a lot of interesting people in Singapore as well. Like people who had moved around the world, were nomadic, built their own businesses. Also like you included, like, wow, right? Like I think, like there's a lot of people I met throughout like the past couple of years who've shown me like it can be done. But one of the things that kind of accelerated this mindset was also through like Asian Wonder Woman, because when you are suddenly like around women who are just doing like incredible things and beyond the 9 to 5, or, they're like entrepreneurs, it becomes normalized. Like in my head, I'm like, oh, this is so normal. Whereas like if you're not in this sphere or you're not in this community, you don't think that it can be possible. So I think that also has just accelerated like everything for me.
Yeah.
What about you?
Join our community. This is a good
plug.
And yeah, no, I think we all need therapy in general. Like it's so interesting, like hearing your story of all these different pieces coming together to shape the way that you think, right? You're like, your dad's supportive or your family's supportive, but they also think there's a safe route. And they also don't expect that much of you, and how that affects your expectations of yourself and what you want to do in life. It's super important. Like I have the opposite experience. And I know we don't have that much time to go into it, but my dad side of the family, even though like we have our issues, my grandparents on my dad's side who raised me, plus my dad, were always just like, you are the smartest person. You are the most like super affirmative. There's just like my grandpa was like, oh, I'm sure there's people prettier than Ivy, but I just can't see them. I'm blind. And same with just like, intelligent, like you've always been the best. Like in my mind, you're just the best. Like super, super affirmative. My mom never said that, but always had like high expectations for me. Yeah. It's like if I wasn't doing well, she was never like, oh, you're not good enough. It was always like okay, let me find you a tutor. Actually, no, that's not always true. I didn't do well in physics in grade 11, and she told me to drop physics. But because she got really frustrated. She was trying to tutor me because she's an engineer, so she took a lot of physics. And she's like, oh my God, I can't even explain to my daughter, you definitely don't have a mind to be an engineer. And or like, she wasn't like that. She was just kind of like, you have your talents. It was always like push strengths. And I think I have this like strong, and this kind of relates it back actually. Like I have always had this strong mindset of like, I have strengths. Let's go and try to play off my strengths and less improve my weaknesses. My parents never focused on my weaknesses. Like, I don't cook still, and my mom might complain about that, but then I found Owen who cooks, right? But then when I go home, my mom's like, oh, why don't my daughters cook? But still never forced me to learn cooking. So like very basic things like this, or like I'm athletic. She's like, oh, I wish I didn't force you into piano. I wish I just like put you into gymnastics or like figure skating, which is what I grew up doing. Like she let me quit piano by the time I was 12 in order to really, really go hard on sports. And so I think that really helps in being able to go all in on something that you think you're good at or you're excited about. And I think that has really helped with risk taking, because risks is really just like playing to win and not playing to not lose, right? So like if you improve your weaknesses, you're just trying to reduce your chances of loss, versus if you really want to win big in life, you're like focusing on what can I do better, like with the gifts that I already have. And I think that relates to adventure and travel and like going all in on a certain lifestyle that maybe some people are more afraid to do.
Yeah. I think the similarity between like our parents as well is like they just didn't stop us, right? Like they didn't shit on our dreams, basically. Whereas like I feel like a lot of Asians out there, like their parents are like, I'm going to disown you because you quit your job, or I'm going to, you're not my daughter because you quit your engineering job. I think both of our parents showed that there's like some sort of support in the decisions that we made, and they let us be free and wander. And that kind of transcended over to like our current wherever we are right now. So I'm grateful. It's a privilege. It is it's
for sure. Yeah. It's so nice to know that like your life is yours, right? And like you get to choose how much to listen to all the voices in your life. And I hope that no matter where our listeners are in terms of like their parents supporting or not supporting their dreams, just like this is just such a struggle. And I think there'll always be opposing voices. Sometimes it's your own too. But amazing. Thanks for another episode, Emily. See you next week.
See ya.
I'm the baddest chick. I'm not a thick. I'm about my business. Show a money clip.